Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Completely Mental. I'm Ben, and today we're diving into a topic that's close to the hearts of many dads out there, the often overlooked world of mental health struggles in fatherhood. You know, if you're anything like me, I've had depression for a long time, right, since I was in my teens. But I thought I had that shit locked down, under control, until I had a child. And at that point, I began to realize I'm in trouble. I want to be there for my child. I want to be there for my wife. But I gotta take care of me. And I know I'm not alone out there. And I know you're not alone out there. And it's just one of those things that we've got to start talking about. And I know men's mental health has been more prevalent lately. Like, talking about men's mental health has become more prevalent. It's become a thing. It's not. It used to not be a thing. You used to have to just kind of grin and bear it. But now, society's made pretty good strides towards allowing men to actually be vulnerable, to share their emotions, and to show that it's okay not being okay, if you will. So, on that note, talking about society and all that, let's kick things off by acknowledging the silent struggle that many dads face. In a society that often places unrealistic expectations on dads to be strong and stoic, the silent struggle of mental health is a reality for many. Did you know roughly 1 in 10 men, well, I'll say roughly 1 in 10 men, the statistic is about 9% of men suffer from depression. I personally find that number to be a little bit low. At least in my group of friends, we all have it, or at least some facet of it. I've got depression. I've got another friend with bipolar disorder. I've got another friend who's also got depression. I don't have many people in my life who aren't affected by some mental health issue or another, or a number of mental health issues. If you're like me, I've got a nice cocktail of them going on. The thing is, of that, if we want to believe that 1 in 10 men, 1 out of 4 of them is actually getting help for it. That's a sobering statistic, because never in history has there been more access to help than now. Between your regular brick and mortar therapist, even talking to your primary care physician if you have one, to your group of friends who might be a good support group, to there's remote therapy that you don't even have to leave your house. All you have to do is pick up your cell phone and stare at it and talk to somebody, or you can even do it over the phone, like talking to the person over the phone. There's never been better access to mental health care, and we are still not getting the help that we need. I think there's still a societal pressure and just a stigma surrounding actually getting help for mental health disorders. I think too many of us were raised by boomers and Gen Xers who think that you shouldn't share your problems with anybody else. You shouldn't be a burden on anybody else. So just suck it up, buttercup, and let's roll. Too many of us were raised in that kind of a household, and I think we hold on to it today. I think we feel a bit of guilt by taking the time out and the time away to focus on us. Like, we feel like we're stealing time from our family, when realistically we need to see it as an investment of our time to being the dad that we want to be, being the man that you want your kids to be. You know, one of the pressures that we have is this pressure to be the provider, to provide. So many dads find themselves struggling and juggling career expectations, financial responsibilities, the desire to be present for their families. How does that pressure really impact your mental health? Survey says, not great, Bob. So what can be done to cope with it? Again, get support, get help. Stop seeing the time away from your family as time away from your family. You're not robbing time from them. You're investing your time to make your time with them better. Just being there in the same room as your kid does not count as quality time. actually interacting with your kid in a meaningful way, that's quality time. If it takes you an hour a week talking to a therapist to develop the habits and the coping skills to be able to have just a sense of belonging and security to get down on the floor and play with your kid and actually spend that quality time with them, you're going to get more quality time with your kids by going to therapy and taking that time away from the house than you would if you just sat there like a bump on a log staring at your phone while your kid scrolls through YouTube. And I know, because I've been that dad. I'm still that dad someday. It's okay. As long as it's not every day. You still have to put in the effort to be dad. And look, I'm not saying that you have to be your kid's best friend. I'm just saying by investing in your mental health, you can gain just so much better quality time with your children. I mean, and it's all a balancing act, right? Between work, your family, your self-care, it can feel like walking a tightrope, and especially with all the pressures that we've already mentioned, like being the provider, being like the head of the household. We need to start exploring the challenges that dealing with our mental health throws at us. And when we start emphasizing the role that self-care that in maintaining our mental well-being plays. We're not statues. We're not these Roman gladiators, right? Some of us envision ourselves as a gladiator. I personally don't. One, I'm too fat for it. I wouldn't fare well anymore. But two, we live in, right now, the 2020s, right? We don't need to be those guys. It's good to have skills. It's good to be strong. It's good to be fit. And those things all do play another facet of your mental health. I'm not downplaying the role of being fit and of working out. What I am downplaying, though, is we don't have to be these, what you might think of as stoic men, just taking it on the chin. It was a little over a year ago that my grandfather passed away. He was the closest family member I've had pass away in about a decade. No, 2 decades. The last person from my family that passed away was my mother. And that's really when my depression started. And then life decided to tack on like anxiety and panic attacks and other fun things. But regardless, my grandfather passing away was just devastating on me. He's one of those guys. Growing up, my grandparents were my neighbors, and like a lot of it was a bit like living in an episode of Everybody Loves Raymond. But Marie was my grandmother, Frank was my grandfather, just like all the way through. Except my grandfather was a former Marine. Well, I say former. Once a Marine, always a Marine. So my grandpa, by virtue of being our neighbor, was like a second father to me. When my mom was sick, and even after she'd passed, when my dad was having a hard time, my grandparents were there to kind of pick up the pieces. My grandfather was there to teach me how to navigate life. And, I always looked at him as this very strong man. And he was this incredibly strong man. He taught me a few things. The first thing was that you got to have patience. And that's not just patience with other people. It's patience with yourself as well. You got to learn to cut yourself some slack. He also taught me that I'm going to have to love myself before I can really love anybody else. That's not a lesson I expected to learn from this Korean War vet, right? But he was one of the first people that really taught me, like, you've got to learn to love yourself before you can love anyone else. It took me 20 years to figure that out. And so I finally started to come around to liking myself, to understanding myself, to trying to better myself. When he got sick, And within a matter of days, he was gone. And I was a wreck. Growing up, the only time I ever saw my dad cry was at my mom's funeral. And this was probably the first time that my kids saw me cry. And sure, I could have stood away. I could have gone into my room. I could have locked myself in the basement and just bawled about it. But my kids wanted to offer me comfort, and that meant the world to me. It was so sweet. By them sitting by me and crying with me and patting me on the back and telling me I'm going to be okay, to them asking questions about Grandpa, and I don't know where I'm going with this. So, Grandpa passes away. I've just finally learned how to really love myself, and I'm opening up to my wife, my kids, and all I want to do is crawl up into a ball and get away from everybody. But what I needed to do, and what I ultimately did, was share with my wife and my kids what I was feeling, why I was feeling it, and we kind of all came together, and they let me have a good cry. They gave me lots of hugs and kisses, and it was honestly one of the most pure outpourings of love that I'd ever felt. And man, did I need it that day. Now, my 6-year-old, my middle child, he's still very curious about. He understands Grandpa passed away, or Pawpaw passed away. My grandpa, his great grandpa, his Pawpaw. He still wants to go visit his grave. But he also wants to know more about him, and he'll blindside me with some of the questions sometimes. But the one that got me the most was just out of the blue, man. He goes, "Daddy, was your grandpa a great man?" And it just sucked the wind out of me. Yeah, he was. He was great. Because, he taught me how to be me. He taught me it was okay to be me. Through all my faults and through all my flaws, it was okay to be me. It was okay to love me for me. And nobody else had ever really done that for me. My grandma had tried. But you have a different connection with your grandma than your grandpa. And so losing him was just losing that a little bit of that piece of me. And then my son will just ask me these questions and remind me of just what a great man he was. And it reminds me of how I can be a great man and a great father for my kids. And one of those things is just not playing into the stereotypes. It's to be your own person. Those stereotypes are ultimately the elephant in the room, masculinity and fatherhood. These pervasive stereotypes just drown us. We need to break them. There's so much bullshit about being an alpha male or a sigma male or whatever. Sure, maybe there's a place for that in business. Maybe there's a place for that in military leadership or whatever. But in the household, man, come on. I would think that you would want to raise a more well-rounded person than that. You want to raise better humans, and part of that is being the better human. You need to break free of the shackles that society tells you have to be. I'm so sick of seeing people like Andrew Tate, and there's another guy who's always well dressed, and I think he has a goatee, but he's also another uber masculine man. And you don't have to be these guys. You don't have to take your lessons from them. Be you. Be goofy. Be who you want to be. But be honest with yourself. Be honest with your family about who you are and what you are. If you're an emotional person, be an emotional person. If you're if you're more suited to gardening than to wrestling, then grow that corn, dude. There's a quote that, or question that Chris Williamson from Modern Wisdom throws out a lot. Like, does it grow corn? And what he means by that is, what you're putting out there, is that ultimately going to grow what you want? Like, is that going to grow what sustains you? Like, is it going to grow the sustenance of your life? Is being that Andrew Tate type character really going to make you happy? Really going to be the right role model for your kids? He might make a couple of decent points, but that doesn't mean that you have to you don't need to base yourself off of this person's internet personality. We gotta get away from that. Be who you are. And in being who you are, understand that you're not going to get there alone. So the last thing I want to talk about is how important it is to actually get out there and seek help and build a proper support system. No one should face mental health challenges alone. Whether it's finding a professional or relying on a network of friends and family, there are always resources available. If you surround yourself with the type of people that you want to be, you're bound to have at least one friend that you are willing and able to bare your soul to, and they process it and help you through it. And if you don't have that system, I highly recommend you find the people that you need to be around. But also I really stress finding the professional help so that you can talk it out. I know not everybody's going to have the time to or feel like they have the time to go out to a therapist, to go out to be with their friends all the time. You don't have to be out all the time. Most of the time when you see a therapist, you're going to go maybe once a week, maybe every other week for 30 to 60 minutes a session. That's not a huge investment in time. Even less so if you factor in places like Talkspace or BetterHelp, where you can get a mental health therapist on your phone. You can even text them. Like those apps have plans for like texting your therapist. So you can be like in a text messaging session. So like if you don't even want to see your therapist's face or you don't want them to see your face, you can still get the ball rolling. The point is, you need to find help. And I want to throw this out there. If you are in like a legit crisis to where you don't know how you're going to keep going on, if you're feeling like ending it, please do me a favor. Dial 911 and get some help, or make your way to the nearest emergency room. There's also if you feel like you're suicidal and you just need to talk to somebody, hit 988 on your phone. This is the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. They're available 24/7. Reach out to them. Nobody wants you to be alone. You're not alone in this. Nobody wants you gone. So I don't want to harp on it for too long, but if you're in that state, get help. I want you to be around, if nothing else, than for you to listen to my next episode. But you've got family, you've got friends, you've got people who will care about you. There are people who will care that you're not around. Whether you believe it or not, it doesn't matter. I know that there's somebody out there who cares that you're at that tipping point. So all that said, find a way to build a support system around you. Again, whether it's professional, whether it's friends, family, whatever, just build that support system. You can even start at like your local church. There's support groups. Find ways of getting help. I'm going to end it with that today. That's a wrap for this episode of Completely Mental. Thank you for joining. remember, parenting is a journey, and by incorporating modern mental health strategies, it becomes so much more fulfilling and an enriching experience. Thank you for listening. I hope you found some insight today.